Alright, so we finally get the wrap up of AFO's backstory, and I want to give him another chance, so let me see how well this chapter turns out, because I'm not really feeling him still. You guys have given me a couple of suggestions and a couple of thoughts about him in the comments, but I still don't really like him that much, but let's see if this chapter changes my mind. But before we get into it, make sure you guys like and subscribe. I know some of you guys come back every week, but make sure you guys are subscribing so that you can help me out, because it costs you nothing, helps me out a lot. And I know I finally hit my goal of 100, but I'm trying to see if I could strive to see if maybe I could hit 500 by March, give or take a couple months. I'll see how close I am as I get close. But if you want to help me out, that's the best way you can. Anyway, let's get into it. So we open up the chapter to that fateful moment between AFO, Yoichi, and Kudo, and we basically see that AFO straight up tore his brother apart during that meeting, which, good luck adapting that for kids, because oh my god. And it's kind of widely debated what kind of quirk he used here. It kind of seems like he used that quirk that he used against Hawk when he attacked him during that vision. Or it could potentially have been decay, but we could talk about that at the end of the chapter. But we come to find out that AFO is actually the person who named Yoichi, because that was his first possession, and we do find out that in Yoichi's name, it does have the kanji for first and given, which is cool, I guess, because he's the first user of One for All. And I know they keep trying to drive in this narrative that AFO doesn't care about his brother, he just sees him as an object, but throughout some of the way he reacts to things in this chapter, I kind of think otherwise. I do think it's kind of what I believe from my video, which you could check it out right here. That he does care for his brother to some degree, because I think he goes through extreme lengths for someone who just sees his brother as a toy. And we also find out that this encounter actually happened 2 months after Kudo saved Yoichi, so it's not actually the first time they meet, which I guess does make me a little happy, because I was kind of pissed last time when I thought that he killed him on their first meeting. And after Yoichi's death, Kudo and AFO lock eyes, and we kind of see that AFO's eyes are actually matted, so it doesn't actually show any reflection, and he has this very uncanny expression. I'm not really sure, it kind of looks like shock on his face. But we see that Kudo is straight up staring into the horror that is this man with many quirks, as AFO seems to just be staring at nothing. There's nothing showing in his eyes, so it's kind of hard to tell how he's feeling in this moment. Well, we cut away to AFO inside this massive tower as he's staring at the remains of Yoichi, which is only really a hand left, and he kind of gives me the vibes of when he gave Shigaraki his family's hands, which does add more fuel to the fire that he could potentially have used decay on Yoichi. Which, maybe I might make a video on that later, we'll see. But for right now, he's staring at Yoichi's hand, and he seems to not be able to detect his quirk, which I guess he might have a quirk that has the ability to detect quirks, or maybe he ran it through a machine, who knows, but doesn't seem to have detected the quirk that he gave him, nor Yoichi's innate quirk. And as for him knowing about his quirk from the get-go, apparently he didn't actually know about Yoichi's ability to give other people's quirks, because he goes on to say, "No, I confirm with my power that Yoichi did not have a meta ability," so yeah, I guess he does have a power. "And I thought unconsciously I stole it when we were babies, but through research I found out that he actually had a quirk factor," which I guess he did run it through a machine, I don't know. "But it was just so weak that my power didn't even consider it a meta ability. It probably stayed that way because he didn't get enough nutrition during development stages. It could have transferred." As seemingly while this is happening, we cut to the third user and the second user as they're looking at some lab results, and we come to find out the third user's name, but we'll get to that in a second, because he says to Kudo, "Leader, are you sure that All for One didn't touch you during the fight?" And he says to him, "Cut the crap, Bruce," which is the third user's name, "go straight to the results." Which apparently he's named Bruce because he's modeled after Bruce Lee, I guess, which every anime has a Bruce Lee kind of figure. And Bruce asks Kudo, "You said you were feeling weird, right?" "Spot on. Your body has 2 factors now, your natural one and your very small, insignificant one," which I guess back then they had the ability to detect quirk factors, which doesn't really make sense because we see Deku go to the doctors like several times and they don't detect that he has like 7 quirks. And simultaneously, we see both Yoichi and All for One as they're both coming to a realization about the effects of this quirk factor. As Kudo says, "Yeah, I had a feeling something was like this." And All for One, "The meta ability I gave him disappeared in order to remediate before the missing parts, someone stole it." And we see both 2 versions of Yoichi, as I guess it's him talking to himself as well as potentially talking to Kudo. But we see the duality of his thoughts on his brother. And he says, "I couldn't stop my brother." And then he also mentions he kept me alive. "He only views people as toys and games. If only you could think about other people's feelings." As we see the two, both Yoichi and AFO, have branching ideas on what this means. And I think this is a really well drawn panel, by the way, but Kudo says, Yoichi lives within me, as well as AFO says, well, this means it still exists. And we see the reflection in both of their eyes as AFO is looking at the same thing. He's looking at the other version of Yoichi's hand and he doesn't see anything, while Kudo's is looking at Yoichi's hand as if like it is inside of him, which is Yoichi being inside of him. Pause. And then we see my favorite and also least favorite part of the manga, which is we see All for One going up against all of the previous users of One for All. And I kind of have mixed feelings about this. But this page has a lot going on, so I'm just going to go first with reading what All for One says, and then I'm going to go through and describe the individual like things that are going on here. But we hear from One for All that from that scene where he was crying when he killed Kudo, he says, I shed a tear because I knew you would be confused by them. I controlled and brought ruin to both things I desired and things that I despised. That's how I kept everything under my control, even though I want you. No matter how much I chase, but you keep defying expectations. And for all the stuff that's happening in this panel, so we obviously get to see Kudo being killed by All for One, as well as Bruce being killed by All for One, which I'm not really sure what's going on with that one. Then we do see when he meets Shigaraki for the first time. I'm guessing that he was at one of his like conferences or one of his evil villain monologues. Then we also see him going up against one of the other users whose name's slipping my mind right now. I think it was Banjo. And then him killing N, which, my God, he got done dirty. As well as him passing on the hair to Nana, who then passes it on to All Might, which we then see in the next panel. But before I move on to that, I gotta mention that Yoichi also says that the power to give and take could have been the kindest in the world, but, you know, AFO used it for evil instead. And we finally get to see that epic clash between All for One versus All Might, and it's cool, I guess. Like, it's a really well drawn panel or page, I mean. But this is kind of underwhelming since we waited so long to see this, and this is kind of all we get out of this. And on the page, we also see that AFO is saying that Yoichi always managed to slip through his fingers. As we then see after the fight, All Might, I guess, leaves All for One's body at a morgue or something, and Shigaraki goes in and steals it, and I believe then he brings him back to life. It doesn't actually say what he does, but I'm assuming this makes All for One the first Nomu, which if it is the case, that makes even less sense, because the Nomus can't restore their brains, and we clearly see that All Might punches the brain right out of All for One. So I have no idea how he brought him back, especially since he has all his cognitive abilities. But I'll talk about that later. But we cut back to the present where All for One is still pissed off at Bakugo for just looking like Kudo. Screams, "It's all your fault, Kudo." As he kind of wonders why the resemblance is even there, since apparently it seemed that he killed all of Kudo's bloodline and every single person related to him. So it doesn't make sense that Bakugo even looks like him. And I think he kind of comes to the realization that it's not necessarily just that he looks like him, but it's the eyes. It's the intensity, how much he wants to defeat him in his eyes. And it's almost as if Bakugo has carried on the will of Kudo. Which leads me to another weird decision they've decided to make with the whole Bakugo and Kudo thing. But again, I'll talk about that at the end. But AFO seems to be weighing all his options on how he wants to get out of this, because he cannot afford to keep rewinding, which, yeah, you can't, because you've been saying you're about to get younger every freaking scene you're in. But anyway, so he starts running through all his options, and he says, what if I use the glue warp to get rid of him, meaning Bakugo? No, the only available teleport spot would be All Might, who's nearby Tomura. I can't keep sparring and getting even younger because Tomura's already fighting back. When I get to him, conflict is inevitable. So that means that when he meets him, that they're going to fight, which will make him rewind even more, which obvious. So this comes to the moment where he kind of comes up with his final gambit, because he knows that he needs enough energy to do the transfer. But he's like, screw that. I need to both kill Bakugo and do the transfer. So he's going to go for one All for One move, where he is literally going to use all his quirks at once. And let's just say, thank God he's an orphan, because this is something only a mother could love. Oh, hi, Hawks. I totally forgot you were here. But this apparent transformation is called Full Factor Release, All for One Goal, which I guess that's like his special move. And this is so powerful that even Yoichi can sense it within the quirk factor of Deku. As he says, it's coming. As All Might looks at this monstrosity that's heading towards not only him, but his students as well. As he says, he'll use all his energy to propel himself. He wants to end things in one move. but that will wind him back to a baby, so this has to be his final gambit. Dodge, young Bakugo. And Bakugo is feeling himself right now. He's not trying to dodge. Which also, how the hell is he flying? Because is his sweat coming out his feet? I don't know. But he says to All For One, you're stupid. You're bound to lose with that thing as the chapter comes to an end. And I'm not gonna lie, that's a pretty epic ending to that chapter. But I do have a lot of complaints, which I gotta get to. But as for rating, I'm gonna give this one a 6 out of 10. Not because the story was really lackluster, it's just that it's, again, filled with a lot of plot holes that I have issues with. I could see why a lot of people would enjoy this though. So I know it's just my personal preference when it comes to the reviewing of the chapter. Now the first one, which might end up being resolved, because I think that this is just a foreshadowing to how One For All's quirk actually works. But Kudo and Yoichi don't actually do a DNA transfer that we see on screen at least, so I have no idea as to how he actually gets that quirk factor. The only thing I could think of is maybe when he gets a blood in his eye right here, but that's all I could really think of. My next big complaint is all the fights between All For One and all the One For All users, because it's just like, what, it's like a quarter of a panel for a lot of these people, and this is such like a big part of the story. This is like one of the moments we've all been waiting for, and it's just reduced to just like a quarter panel, and it kind of sucks. And especially with the 2-page spread of him versus All Might, it's very cool, but it's like that's all we're getting out of that. Like there's been so much talk about how that battle went, so much talk about how All For One got All Might with a sneaky blow, all these like things that are mentioned that we're just never going to see. Maybe the anime might adapt it and add these parts, but it does suck to see that this is kind of missing from the actual story itself. Probably because Hori's just kind of running out of time and doesn't really have time to delve into this. Also, how does Shigaraki even bring All For One back to life? Because as I said before, like the Nomus don't regenerate their brain, so how can he bring All For One back to life when he has his brain? And he also seems to be equally as smart as when he was alive, so his brain is fully intact for the most part, but he couldn't repair his eyes and nose or anything else? That makes like no sense at all. And as for the relationship between Kudo and Bakugo, I guess it's like okay that they're not really related, but why even draw them so similar looking? I guess for this like moment, it's the only thing I could think of, but I have noticed this in the manga that they have been kind of trying to draw Bakugo and Kudo to look a lot less different each time they're on screen, because the first time you see Kudo, he looks almost exactly like Bakugo, and each subsequent drawing after that, like their similarities kind of dull a little bit each time, to the point where Kudo doesn't really look that much like Bakugo anymore. But I know the whole point of them not being related at all is gonna piss a lot of people off, and I think like when I was invested in the whole Bakugo's like grandfather thing or Bakugo theory, I would have been a lot more like pissed about it, but now I've just kind of like gotten let down enough that I'm like, it's whatever. And as for All For One doing this whole final gambit thing, I'm pretty sure to some degree it's gonna work. I kind of wonder if he's going to actually end up giving his quirk to Deku instead of giving it to Shigaraki, because it seems like Yoichi was foreshadowing that he wants someone who has a kind heart to hold the power that All For One has, because he could do so much good with it. And Deku's the only one that really fits that criteria. And also, it would kind of suck if Bakugo does defeat All For One, because the whole point of their battle is that All For One needs to be defeated by One For All. So him being defeated by a non-One For All user would kind of be a little bit lackluster. Or maybe just not the best decision. I mean, Bakugo fighting AFO has been a pretty cool battle, and it is a little bit of symbolism to him defeating him, because Bakugo strive for just great power. Now he's defeating someone with great power. But again, I do think it should potentially go to a One For All user, or to some degree One For All should be involved in the final battle. Hell, we might see the sparks that are within Bakugo from the Two Heroes movie even reignite again. Because there's no way in hell Bakugo is going to be able to defeat whatever the hell this amalgamation of his quirks is. Because it's already mentioned that he's not nearly as strong as Endeavor, which I touched on in another video. But the fact that he doesn't have One For All, or he's not being boosted by One For All, I don't think he could take on an attack of this caliber from what has been stated. I think it would just be a big, like, shonen anime logic leap to really pull this off. But anyway, I think that's really all I have to say about this. Those little like nitpicks is just why I didn't really vibe with it. And I think I might make a video on how I think the series is going to end, and see how much of it actually lines up with the actual finale. But we'll see. But anyway, that's all I got for now. So if you guys made it to the end of the video, make sure you hit that thumbs up, because more content coming your way. I think I should have dropped the Boruto video by now. Probably should have came out Monday. But if you guys like this stuff, make sure to keep coming back. And make sure you hit that like button, because as I said in the beginning, it helps me out a lot. And I'm at the start of like doing this whole YouTube thing, so I need as much like and support as I can get. But it's up to you guys on how you feel about me. So I appreciate you all. Thank you again for watching. Stay safe, my ninjas. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.